an old run-down gas station in the heart of Jacksonville, Florida. It was a sweltering, suffocating afternoon when a white police officer's brutal kick, delivered in broad daylight, landed squarely on a defenseless black woman. That kick didn't just knock her to the gravel, tearing her knee open through a pair of faded jeans. It unleashed a storm no one in the decaying justice system ever saw coming. Because this wasn't just any woman you could stomp on and walk away. Her name was Naomi Jefferson, the Director of Homeland Security for the Southeastern United States. And just 3 minutes after being assaulted, she didn't dial 911. She called Washington. Today, you won't just hear another story about racism. You'll witness how one woman stood up and brought an entire system to its knees. If you still believe justice matters, hit like, subscribe, and come with us to uncover the truth. Because the storm has only just begun. Late afternoon on July 7th, the sun over Jacksonville, Florida refused to set, clinging stubbornly to the sky. On the packed lanes of Moncrief Avenue, lined with aging barbershops, modest churches, and time-worn soul food diners, the Roosevelt Petro gas station stood like a forgotten corner of the city, its paint peeling, corrugated tin awning drooping, and the heavy scent of gasoline soaked into the breeze. Naomi Jefferson pulled in, driving a black 2019 Ford Expedition, its front rolling past a faded Pump Number 3 out-of-order sign. She wore large sunglasses, her hair neatly tied back, and a light gray khaki jacket draped casually over a cotton crewneck tee. She looked like any ordinary middle-aged woman, maybe a teacher, a nurse, or someone just trying to get home before nightfall. What no one could see, however, was that Naomi had once led multi-state anti-trafficking operations, worked hand-in-hand with DHS, and served as a direct Homeland Security advisor during the 2018 Atlanta terror threat. She was a Southeastern Regional Director for the National Security Coordination Division, and today all she wanted was to fill up her tank, grab a cold Sprite, and continue her trip back to Brunswick, her birthplace. As the fuel hissed into the tank, Naomi stood still, listening. Then another sound broke through, the crunch of tires on gravel. A white Duval County patrol car crawled into the lot. Out stepped Deputy Hank Callahan, tall, white, buzz-cut, square-jawed, boots still crusted with dried mud, eyes locked like a scope on its target. Naomi didn't look up. She didn't have to. She knew that look. It wasn't for checking. It was for asserting power, and that kind of power always aimed at her skin first. "Where you from?" he asked, voice hoarse and laced with tobacco. Naomi turned back calmly, polite but unyielding. "Just filling up, sir." "Out-of-state plates. Georgia. I'm heading home." He stepped closer. "A car like this doesn't usually stop around here. This gas station's not exactly a hot spot. So what are you really doing here?" Naomi gave a small smile. She knew that scent. It wasn't gasoline. It was bias, old and instinctive. "I need gas and a drink. That okay with you?" Without warning, he ripped her sunglasses off. "License, now." She paused, but not out of fear. Never. She quietly pulled out her ID. He snatched it, reading the name. Naomi R. Jefferson. "Sounds like a politician," he muttered. Her stare didn't budge. "Just a U.S. citizen. Not the kind that fits in this neighborhood," he replied coldly. She knew exactly what that meant. Not fitting in had nothing to do with her car, jacket, or license plate. It was about her brown skin, her full lips, and the fact her eyes didn't drop when faced with a badge and a gun. He didn't hand the license back. Instead, he moved in closer, his chest brushing her shoulder, breath thick with old coffee and contempt. Naomi didn't flinch. "I am not resisting," she said evenly, "but I would like to know the legal basis for this questioning." No reply. Instead, Callahan shoved her hard against the car. Her head hit the side mirror, hip sliding down the door. She clenched her jaw, arm wrapping around her scraped knee. "No reason necessary," he growled. "Around here, I am the reason." Naomi lay tilted on the gravel, hands trembling but eyes dry. A few yards away, hidden behind the ice cooler, a brown-skinned teen named Rico, 16 in a loose t-shirt and ripped shorts, was filming everything with his phone. Rico caught it all, the boot slamming into Naomi's side, her stifled cry, and Callahan walking away like he'd just tossed out trash. Blood soaked through her jeans, dripping onto the oil-stained gravel. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't flinch. She picked up her license, brushed off the dust, pulled out her phone, and dialed one number. "This is Jefferson. I've been assaulted. I need a full file pull on Deputy Hank Callahan, Duval County, immediately. And initiate internal investigation protocol." No one at that gas station knew what had just been set in motion. But 3 minutes after that kick, the storm was alive. And Naomi wasn't just going to rise. She was going to burn down the system that made him. No one at Roosevelt gas station that evening knew that the woman kicked to the ground by a sheriff's deputy wasn't someone easily overlooked. Naomi Jefferson, with her oversized sunglasses, dusty gray jacket, and worn low-heeled shoes, looked like just another middle-aged woman passing through on her way home. But behind that appearance stood 3 decades of experience coordinating federal security operations. She'd once sat in closed-door briefings with the FBI director, led the on-site response during the 2018 Atlanta terrorist attack, commanded multi-state task forces, ordered the evacuation of 600 students during a bomb threat, and carried a trafficked girl out of an international smuggling ring in her own arms. She wasn't just a public servant, she was the quiet standard of a system too often stained by those who wore the badge in vain. When Naomi was kicked, she didn't react like a victim. No screams, no flailing, no panic. She pressed her palm to the gravel, rose to her feet, retrieved her driver's license from the dirt, brushed it off, and pulled out a phone designed only for regional directors. No scrolling, no searching, just a secure 2-step authentication and an encrypted line that connected directly to Washington. The voice on the other end shifted instantly when they heard her name. Director Jefferson. No emotion, just facts. She had been assaulted by a sheriff's deputy named Hank Callahan at the Roosevelt gas station in Jacksonville, Florida. She requested immediate access to his internal personnel file, including sealed complaints and frozen disciplinary data. Every word Naomi spoke landed with the precision of a tactical order. Not one syllable wasted. She didn't call the local police, didn't ask for medical assistance, because what she wanted was to witness firsthand how the system truly behaved when it didn't know who she was. And she was right. Hank Callahan, after kicking her like garbage, climbed back into his patrol car, slammed the door, and drove off in a cloud of dust. No incident report, no medical check, no radio call. He thought he'd won, just like he always had. He had no idea that 3 minutes after that kick, a dozen national security servers had already started spinning, crunching his data, and lighting up the names he thought were untouchable. Naomi stood there, one hand resting on her aching knee, the other holding the phone steady, her voice calm like reciting multiplication tables. From across the lot, a skinny teenager named Rico, wide-eyed, phone still trembling in his hand, approached her slowly. He didn't know who she was. He just knew he'd captured something so wrong, it made his chest tighten. When Naomi looked at him, there was no anger in her eyes, just the stillness of someone who had seen too much. She didn't flash a badge or rattle off her title. She just nodded, enough for Rico to know his video wouldn't be forgotten. When Naomi opened the trunk and pulled out a small cloth bag containing her badge, the evening light caught the metal just right, like a blade slicing through the air. On it read, National Security Coordination Division, Southeast Director. But she didn't raise it like a shield. She looked at it, then tucked it away. Because today she didn't need to protect herself. She needed to expose the truth in its rawest form. And that truth was, in a country like the United States, even a security director could be knocked to the ground for the color of her skin, if no one knew her name. The black SUV rolled out of the gas station. Naomi didn't activate the sirens, no lights. But as her car merged into rush hour traffic, internal alarms began flashing red at the Southeastern Command Center. The name Hank Callahan popped up on 4 dormant reports. One had been closed after just 2 days. Another, from 2019, detailed excessive force against a Puerto Rican nurse, later deleted from the system due to lack of video evidence. Naomi didn't need evidence anymore. She had Rico, and Rico had the truth. Naomi Jefferson wasn't just another woman, but that day she showed America that no matter who she was, this system must learn to treat every black woman as if she were the director. Naomi Jefferson drove away from the gas station as if nothing had happened. But behind her sunglasses and steering wheel, a storm was brewing. Her knee throbbed, flesh bruised beneath her jeans, but her mind was sharp, like glass honed to a blade. Every press of the gas pedal was a decision. She didn't drive home. She veered left onto Bay Meadows Road, circled past a near-empty convenience store, pulled over and opened her personal laptop from the passenger seat. An encrypted connection granted her immediate access to the internal security reporting network. Within 90 seconds, she filed a request to archive all available data on Hank Callahan, including any surveillance footage from the Roosevelt station, if it still existed. But Naomi understood this world all too well. She knew the most critical footage wouldn't come from the system. It would come from a teenager named Rico. At that very moment, inside a cluttered second-floor bedroom on Lem Turner Street, 16-year-old Rico Martinez sat hunched over his phone, watching the video he had filmed again and again. 15 times he had played it, and with each replay, the ache in his chest grew, not from witnessing Naomi's physical pain, but from seeing justice kicked to the ground and feeling powerless. But on the 16th viewing, Rico didn't just watch, he hit share. On TikTok, he titled the video, "This is what they do when they think no one's watching." He added the hashtag #, Justice for Naomi, though he didn't know her full name. He didn't know who she was. He only knew she hadn't done anything wrong, and yet was kicked like an animal. The video spread like wildfire in a drought. In just 2 hours, it racked up over 100,000 views. By sunrise, it had reached Facebook, Reddit, then Twitter. A local journalist named Tasha Wynn was the first to connect the dots. She thought the woman in the video looked a lot like Naomi Jefferson, the high-ranking security official who had once appeared on CNN following a school shooting the year before. Tasha cross-checked public photos, comparing cheekbone angles, posture, even a faint scar on the woman's left chin. She was 90% certain that was enough. The first article dropped. Is the woman in the viral video the Southeast Director of National Security? Within the hour, Naomi's name trended across search engines. The hashtag #, Naomi Jefferson exploded. Justice for Naomi hit 1 million mentions within 6 hours. A second video, this one from a nearby security camera, was anonymously leaked to a local news station. A different angle, but it confirmed the same truth. Naomi had not resisted, and it was Callahan who initiated violence. The reaction was no longer local. It had crossed state lines. It had become a catalyst. From Atlanta to Houston, Los Angeles to Philadelphia, civil rights organizations began to speak out. A prominent attorney, Marcus Bell, reposted the video with a single caption, "If a person can be kicked to the ground just for their skin color, then the whole system is guilty for watching." Major news networks followed suit. CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News couldn't look away. On television, Naomi's fall played on loop, not for shock value, but so the nation could witness the coldness on the face of the man who kicked her. Naomi did not speak to the press. She didn't post online. She didn't appear on camera. For 24 hours after the video went viral, she did one thing. She built a counterattack strategy. She knew the public's anger was necessary, but not enough. Hashtags fade. But the system, if left unexposed, would birth more Hank Callahans. Naomi didn't want a wave of outrage. She wanted a flood that ripped out the rot at its roots. At 3 a.m., the regional director at the Southeast FBI office received a secure message from Naomi. I need immediate access to all suspended internal affairs records from Duval County since 2017, especially those involving racially motivated misconduct. The message was marked Top Secret, Priority 1. On the other end, agents familiar with Naomi's tone didn't ask questions. They acted. Because when Naomi Jefferson moved, it wasn't a case anymore. It was a campaign. And sure enough, less than 6 hours later, top journalists received a leaked analysis. Hank Callahan had been the subject of 4 brutality complaints over 6 years. All were handled internally and quietly closed without independent review. In 3 of those cases, the victims were people of color. In the 4th, a Latina nurse. The name of Duval County Sheriff Martha Dolan appeared in every closure decision. The curtain had begun to tear. Naomi never stepped into the spotlight, but behind the scenes, she moved like she was running a counterterrorism operation. Each piece of evidence secured, each witness protected. Every puzzle piece was a strike at a system decaying beneath a mask of justice. She didn't shout. She didn't pound the table. She let the truth speak for itself in rhythm, like a symphony building to triumph. And at the center of it all, the boy who first dared to raise his phone, Rico, became a symbol. In a brief local interview, when asked why he recorded the incident, he simply said, "I didn't know who she was. I just knew it was wrong, and I couldn't look away." Naomi watched that interview in silence. Then she smiled, not because she was vindicated, but because the system she had spent her life protecting was finally being forced to look at itself and could no longer deny what it saw. Naomi Jefferson had never believed in luck, especially not in intelligence or national security. Every piece of information she had ever handled, from a subtle phrasing in a contract copy to the flicker of an ambassador's eye, had to be mapped into the architecture of a system. Nothing was random, and no one was just a bad apple. Not if they survived too long, too quietly, inside a machine much bigger than themselves. Hank Callahan, with his dirty boots and disdainful stare, could not have skated past 4 complaints untouched unless there was a whole forest of rotting power behind him, propping him up. When Naomi opened the first decrypted report from the CJIS system, just 12 hours after the video went viral, she wasn't surprised to see familiar names repeating. At the top of each case summary, case closure approved by Sheriff Martha L. Dolan. Naomi remembered that name, not from a meeting, but from an internal report 2 years earlier about budget approvals for militarized gear in Duval County, one of Florida's most densely populated Black communities. The numbers had raised her eyebrows then, but the report had been sidelined under state security priority. Not this time. This time, Martha Dolan wasn't just a signature, she was the axis. Naomi set her laptop down on the wooden table of a short-term rental cabin in Fernandina Beach, a hideout from the media swarm tightening like a web around Jacksonville. Outside, the pines whispered and the sea stretched to infinity. But inside her mind, data threads were weaving a second web, vaster, deeper, and far more dangerous. She began to sketch a chart by hand, something no algorithm could replace, refined through years of black ops in Mexico, Yemen, and across the U.S. At the center of the web, Callahan, connected directly to Martha Dolan, a three-term sheriff known for being tough on crime and fiercely traditional, closely tied to State Senator Philip Trask, who had once served on a fiscal oversight board with Dolan's husband. Trask, a former military man, seasoned politician, always in dark suits, fond of quoting Law and Order, while quietly supporting budget cuts to local police accountability. When Naomi uncovered that Trask had personally lobbied to block an internal review of Dolan following a 2017 shooting, she knew this wasn't personal anymore. This was systemic, a model of protection. The next links in the chain bled through like ink and water. She discovered a private security firm named Sentinel Group, previously contracted to provide tactical training for the Duval County Police Department, had been awarded equipment deals based solely on Dolan's recommendation, bypassing public bidding. Trask had been photographed at Sentinel's ribbon cutting 3 years earlier. 1 month later, Callahan was enrolled in extended tactical training at Sentinel. He returned with increased field authority, but surveillance logs on his activities afterward were strangely vague. Naomi didn't need video footage anymore. She needed a money trail. And when Marcus, her trusted associate, sent her a dossier gathered from an anonymous whistleblower inside the state's finance office, she knew she was near the core. Nearly $1.2 million over 3 years had been funneled through 3 ghost organizations: a school safety advisory group, an emergency response readiness initiative, and a community legal education fund. No websites, no phone numbers, no public operations. Each entity traced back to a single P.O. box in Orange Park, a small town where Martha Dolan's brother owned 3 properties registered to leasing fronts. Naomi looked at the map. She drew lines, scribbled, crossed out, circled. These weren't images for a camera. No hashtag could capture what she was seeing. An octopus-shaped network, its body buried deep underground, its tentacles coiled tightly around institutions we still dared to call justice. Then the knockout blow came from the most unexpected place. A woman named Clarisse Mendez, a nurse formerly employed at Duval Medical Center, who had filed a complaint against Callahan in 2019. She claimed he had dragged her from her vehicle, handcuffed her, cursed her in Spanish, and kept her in a patrol car for over 40 minutes without explanation. The case had been dismissed due to lack of evidence and no video confirmation. But Clarisse had held on to something, a dashboard audio recording from her car. 17 minutes long, never shared with anyone, until she saw Naomi in that viral video. The recording captured it all: threats, verbal abuse, and, chillingly, the sound of Callahan ending a phone call after receiving instructions from a woman's voice. "Handle it. We don't need any more problems." The tone was unmistakable. It sounded exactly like Martha Dolan. Naomi sat silently as the recording ended. No reaction, no outward emotion. She simply opened her laptop, created a new folder, and titled it Cover-Up Pattern Duval. When Naomi Jefferson stepped into her makeshift office at the Jacksonville Federal Building, a former holding room once used for low-level personnel detainment, the outside world was still blanketed in morning mist, and the sun was no more than a faint red blur behind layers of heavy cloud. The room was silent, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes, a slow-turning ceiling fan, and the soft clicks of an old coffee maker Marcus had hauled in from home. There were no double-pane windows, no receptionist, no leather chairs or flags behind her desk. But Naomi had never needed any of those things. In front of her was everything required to launch the most significant legal offensive of her career. A comprehensive list of individuals linked to the cover-up network within the Duval County Sheriff's Department, alongside financial records, testimonies, video footage, audio files, and a hand-drawn power map that she, Marcus, and Clarice had spent the last 2 weeks assembling. Each name wasn't just a person, it was a link, a knot in the web the system had built to shield itself from consequences. At the center remained Hank Callahan, the deputy who once believed kicking a middle-aged black woman at a gas station would be a forgotten moment. Now his name appeared on the front page of a case file stamped in red. Priority target, federal civil rights violation, use of force pattern, active investigation. Beneath his was Martha Dolan, the sheriff, now the primary suspect in obstruction of federal investigation, suppression of evidence, and abuse of authority. And deeper still, the blurred yet undeniable thread led to Philip Trask, Florida state senator. The man who had overseen Duvall's budget, slashed internal audit channels, and backed unvetted funding programs with silent consent. Naomi took a long breath. This was no longer about her. This wasn't about a single kick. It was a fault line about to rupture the political bedrock, and she knew how far the tremors could reach. She didn't start with an indictment, nor a press conference. She began with a single encrypted email to the Department of Justice, addressed directly to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. The message was short, with only one opening line. Attached, comprehensive internal network assessment of systemic misconduct, Duval County, Florida, Dolan, Callahan, Trask. Beneath that were 186 pages of documentation, over 300 files of digital evidence, 4 video clips, 2 verified audio recordings, a diagram of illegal budget flows, and 9 corroborated personal testimonies. Every section came with Naomi's precise action recommendations, no excess, no ambiguity. At the same time, Marcus, her loyal partner, forwarded a distilled summary to a veteran journalist at the New York Times. Anonymous in source, but sharp enough to raise the central question: is a shadow network of police protection, political shielding, and illicit funding operating parallel to Florida's justice system? Naomi didn't wait. She moved next to meet with Denise Hampton, the federal prosecutor she had worked with during a 2016 Kansas City takedown. One of the only people Naomi trusted to shift from investigation to full criminal prosecution. The meeting took place on the 6th floor of the U.S. Attorney's Office. 4 people, Naomi, Marcus, Denise, and a senior financial crimes investigator from the DOJ. No official recorders, no media presence. But the truth was laid out, layer by layer, lined with blood spilled in silence because no one dared speak. Naomi presented with no theatrics, no emotion, just truth, raw, precise, and whole. Every detail had a witness. Every dollar had a receipt. Every action carried legal weight. When she finished, Denise was quiet for several seconds, then nodded slowly. "We're past investigation, Naomi. This is a politically protected criminal enterprise. This is RICO." Naomi allowed herself a faint smile. "And I've got one more piece you'll need to prove it." She slid a printed copy of an internal email onto the table. It was correspondence between Trask's office and a private contractor discussing the upcoming community safety grant package. And within it, a line that read, "Keep Martha quiet so her people can keep the streets calm. We don't need another one of those videos." Denise read the line, her eyes narrowing. Then she rose from her seat, stepped out of the room, and said just one thing. "I'm requesting subpoenas by the end of today." The raid order was approved at exactly 5:42 a.m. on a Monday, 23 days after Naomi Jefferson was kicked to the ground at Roosevelt gas station. Just 1 hour later, while the sun had yet to crest the eastern pines of Jacksonville, federal agents moved across the city, silent, precise, like clockwork ticking toward reckoning. 6:07 a.m., at a gated suburban estate, Sheriff Martha Dolan was jolted awake by heavy knocking. Still in her robe, not yet in her slippers, she was read her search and arrest warrant, right in front of her husband and 2 sons. No screaming, no resistance, only the hollow look of a woman realizing she no longer had the power to call anyone to save her. 7:18 a.m., Hank Callahan was intercepted in his driveway, suitcase in one hand, laptop in the other. "I'm being set up," he shouted, but the agents didn't respond. They didn't need to. The evidence had already been logged, cross-checked, and authenticated by his own dashboard camera. His voice, his slurs, his laugh after the kick. Every second, captured. 10:43 a.m., Senator Philip Trask was having breakfast at a luxury restaurant in Tallahassee when 3 plainclothes officers approached. When he realized who they were, his eyes remained cold, but his hand clenched the napkin that slipped from his fingers. A RICO warrant was placed before him, accusing him of organizing and financing a racially motivated protection network embedded in the state's law enforcement system. The first 3 dominoes fell, and the entire structure began to shake. Within 72 hours, over 17 individuals were summoned. Archived case files reopened, bank accounts frozen. Naomi didn't need to say a word. The truth had already stepped out from the shadows, demanding back the voice that justice had been denied for far too long. When the courthouse doors finally closed behind the last verdict, when the handcuffs clicked shut on those who once thought themselves untouchable, and when Naomi Jefferson, dressed in black, descended the courthouse steps with the very legs once kicked and bruised, now healed and unwavering, people no longer saw her as a victim. They saw the flame of justice, not extinguished, but roaring stronger than ever. She didn't just expose Callahan, she exposed an entire system that swallowed the powerless whole in the dark. She didn't win with force, but with truth. Not with power, but with principle. With the unshakable refusal to stay silent. This story is a reminder, justice does not arrive on its own. It must be reclaimed, step by step, evidence by evidence, person by person who refuses to stay silent. And if you're still here, listening to these final words, remember this. Sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to lie still, and an empire will tremble. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because there are so many stories like this one that deserve to be told, and we will not let them be forgotten.